So I think it is now 1 o'clock in London, so we can begin. Ken, you've disappeared on me, yes? Oh, that's because you're there. I think we're going to begin our Google Hangout if we've got everybody around our virtual table. So I'll just wait for a minute or two, so it's 1 o'clock all over the world. And I will then welcome everybody to Changemakers. I'm welcoming Changemakers across the world and really be delighted to be welcoming you to our Makers of More Hangout, and it's the first in a series of online discussions which are being run by Ashoka in partnering with Arthur Guinness Projects. And today we're talking about generating culture and technology solutions in order to enhance both all of our well-being and the well-being of our communities. And I've got really three absolutely fabulous guests. I'm delighted to be joined again because we did actually meet in London not too long ago, but delighted to be joined around our virtual table by Pamela Chng, who is joining us from Singapore. Pamela, what's the time in Singapore there now?
9 p.m.
9 p.m. Okay. Okay, so it's a good evening. I think you must be at home, judging from your background.
Yes.
Yep, I'm glad you're not in the office at 9 p.m. So we're joined by Pamela, and she is in Singapore, a Arthur Guinness Project awardee and a founder of a very different type of coffee company. Also joined from fellow UK resident, Ashoka fellow Ken Banks, who's the founder of many companies, including many around mobile tech in order to provide social good and environmental change, as well as Joan Webley, who is joining us from Jamaica, from Kingston, am I right?
Yes,
and
right.
You are an Arthur Guinness Projects awardee, and you have started a very creative type of business. And what's the time there in Kingston, Jamaica?
It is 8 a.m. Not as sunny as we'd hope for or normally expect, but it's 8 a.m. here.
Excellent. Well, very good morning. I hope you had a good breakfast. So you've all got really fantastic stories to share, and I'm very, very much looking forward to hearing more about them in a minute. But before I kick off, I just want to share a few housekeeping rules for the benefit of everybody who's tuning in all over the world to us. This conversation is being live streamed, and you can catch it if you go to changemakers.com /makers of more. And we're also throughout the conversation going to be tweeting live sound bites from our conversation. So if you follow hashtag makers of more, that's all one word, hashtag makers of more, you can get the latest updates. As well, later in the conversation, we want to hear from you. So using the same hashtag makers of more, please do take part in the conversation and join in, because that's the way it's going to be a very strong conversation if we can hear from you too. So I'm just going to first of all kick off with Pamela, if that's okay with Ken and Joan, just to hear a little bit more about Bettr Barista and your story in Singapore, because you founded something which is much more than a coffee company. It's really a coffee academy, empowering people through the culture of coffee. And I should say we're really going to look at this whole conversation about culture and technology, but here I just thought it would be great to hear from all of our guests at the top of our hour. So Pamela, tell me a little bit more about your special whole culture of coffee and your whole business that you started up in Singapore.
Yeah. Bettr Barista is a professional coffee academy. And what we do is our social program works with marginalized women and youth at risk, and we skill them up with specialty coffee skills. In addition to that, we also do emotional training with them, physical training, and the whole idea is to give them life skills and work skills so that they can start to become productive people in the economy. Mm-hmm. And I think we're using coffee culture as a vehicle to do that. I think coffee as a culture has really exploded in the past, 5 or 6 years. It's using that power that's been generated to create some positive change and be good and help people.
Okay, that sounds good. And what really inspired you to start a business like that? Was it the coffee that came first, or was it the social activism that came first?
I think it was the social that came first. I think at the core of what we do, it is really about trying to create positive change. And coffee, I think, was a vehicle. I think it was just a matter of timing. Was looking at the cultural trends that were emerging at the time of founding Bettr Barista, and I identified coffee as one of a very powerful cultural trend. And it helps that I really love coffee, so it's important to do what we love. Yeah.
And does everybody know what you have created when they go and they buy a coffee from you, or they ask for one of you guys to do a training session with them? Do they have an awareness that it's a social business, or do they see it because you do a brilliant service?
Interesting. I think we have about maybe 50-50. There are people who come in and they have no idea that of the social aspect of what we do, and when they find out, they're pleasantly surprised, which is always great. And there are people who come to us because of the social work that we do. So I think it's great that there are both camps are coming in, and I think it speaks to the testament of what the service and the product that we're trying to deliver to the consumer.
Great. I'm going to turn to you now, Ken. We're doing a slightly formal introduction when I'm turning to you each in turn, but when we after we hear just a little bit about your stories, I hope you guys are going to be a bit rude and interrupt me and interrupt each other and come in when you feel you have something that's worthwhile saying, because we don't want to be too formal here. We're doing a Google Hangout. We're not sitting in a pompous broadcasting operation, I should say. So please, we'll just hear from each one of you initially, but after that, please feel free just to join in, as indeed people who are watching this, we hope that you guys will join in too later via Twitter. So Ken, let me turn to you. You really are a serial entrepreneur, because you've started up a lot of different businesses, bringing people together through the power of technology. And really tech-based projects, mobile-based projects, from Frontline SMS to Kiranja.net, which kind of puts them together. And tell me what really you feel unites your work.
Well, for me, the fact that I'm so technology-focused is almost accidental. I started out being really more interested in the issues and the problems that were out there more than the technology that might be able to fix it. Technology came along much later as a tool, which fortunately, in the case of mobile at least, found itself able to fix a lot of problems that non-profits were facing in the field. And my probably going back over my career, my sort of longest amount of experience I've had is ironically in the technology sector. But for about 15 years, I spent a lot of time working and traveling across the African continent, trying to understand conservation and development from the perspective of the people that were trying to deal with those particular problems. So empathy is a word which Ashoka are trying to push out as something we need to really make more of and understand. And for me, I think empathy has been absolutely key in trying to first of all really understand the problems and the issues of the people that we're trying to help. And then after that, if you can in some way find a solution to solve a problem they face, and that's great. Or if you can in some way support them, ideally, in finding a solution to the problem they face, and that's all well and good. But for me, the tech sort of has become, I suppose, the largest, most visible part of the work that I do. But for me, really, it's it could have been a crayon or a box or anything else that I might have been using to fix the problems that I ended up seeing.
So that's interesting. We'll talk more about technology in the conversation, but it's been Africa and all the certain particular parts of Africa that have really driven you to seek solutions.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Live Aid in 1985, and of course, Band-Aid 30 is now out, and all the controversy around that. That's probably a Google Hangout in itself. But yeah, for me, I was really very interested. My grandparents were very keen amateur naturalists. I'd seen Live Aid in '85. I was very curious about the developing world, and coming from Jersey in the Channel Islands with a fairly privileged upbringing, working in the offshore banking sector and so on. The world really wasn't like that, and I knew that, and the only way I could really get to understand it was to get myself out there and try to basically live and travel among the people that I really ideally in some sense wanted to try to figure out if I could help. And Africa was the continent that kept calling me. It's not really been by design that I've hardly done anything in India or anywhere in South America. Most of my friends now work across the continent too, so I suppose I'm now condemned and doomed, isn't it, to the rest of my career probably focusing on that continent. But that's not a bad thing. There's still a lot I need to learn, and I'm still fascinated by the people and the cultures, and this growing sense of belief that many Africans are themselves going to find the solutions to the problems they face, not outsiders.
And technology can do a lot to help empower them do that. It is quite an exciting time that we're living in. Joan, let me turn to you. You're actually a lawyer by training, but now you're enabling Jamaicans to make a living through their art. And really, from what I understand, building a space where people can enable their own creativity to flourish. Tell me, how does that work?
Absolutely. I think this is actually quite a brilliant segue. Ken's last words were kind of really where I come up on in terms of, or I come from, in terms of his belief that it's really Africans that are going to come up with these solutions for themselves. Nanook is sort of taking a similar approach or a similar stance in that what we're trying to do is empower artists or empower creative communities like they genuinely have never been before, with the sort of resources and intellectual property skills, but in a really accessible way, in a tangible way, in a practical way. And I think that the results that we've been seeing already, and we're in very, very early stages, are encouraging. And I think that the possibilities and opportunities really, I mean, we like to say that our approaches are as creative as our members. So one day we're having a brainstorming session, the next day we're having a seminar, the next day it's a painting party. So it's different things, and it's whatever we need to do to help them develop and showcase and reach markets. And yeah, it's interesting and it's dynamic.
Well, for people who don't know Nanook, can you, as we haven't got a video here that can pop up, we haven't got that, but can you just give us a shape both of what it looks like and also about how people might together, what is it as a business? I don't think people perhaps have a handle on that quite.
Absolutely. Okay, and Nanook is really easier shown rather than told, I always say, but in terms of feel or for space, there's actually a physical facility. We're located in a very central area of Kingston, which is very important for us as well. So we're accessible to the whole island really once they can get into town. It's a multi-purpose space, so during the day there's actually an open air lounge, a kind of tree house we call it. It's enabled with Wi-Fi, so our members include filmmakers, designers, writers, poets, application developers, and they come and co-work out of this space during the day. They pay a subscription fee, so that's part of our model, which is hybrid. They pay a subscription fee to be there on a monthly membership basis. And then in addition to that, we plan special events such as showcase events, the brainstorming session, as I mentioned. Tonight we're having an Ebola awareness event.
So what are you doing for your Ebola awareness event? What's going on there?
They're actually going to be having a live Skype link up with some persons in Ghana. There's some publicists who have organized local artists to create new recordings in support of raising funds to send more kits to Ghana or Liberia, and so they're actually going to be holding this awareness fundraiser to kind of sensitize more Jamaicans to what's really happening over there and also show them ways that they can get involved in change. So we importantly facilitate the business of creativity, but it's very important to us to hold fast to the purpose or the societal, the capacity for societal change that we think culture and creativity has. It's a social enterprise, so we're giving them business models and intellectual property skills, but we're very interested in the persons that are developing these projects as well.
That sounds fantastic. I'm keen to have a kind of spark a general conversation with all three of you about your stories, about the work that you do, and also about the whole nature of culture and creativity. And here, I should say, we're talking about culture in a broad sense. We're talking about culture in terms of a movement, but also about culture in terms of trends, what people value, including creativity and works of art, which are created by some of the people who are your clients, Joan, but also ways that we relate to each other as individuals, as communities. And I think there's really a common thread between all three of you, Joan, Pamela, and Ken, the idea that you're empowering these sort of growing cultural movements in order to create some meaningful change. So
yeah,
go on, Joan.
Oh, yes, I'm going to step up to your challenge and butt in here because I think that...
Go on. Good for you. Good for you.
You're completely spot on in that I started out thinking that the important thing that I would be doing was bringing internet connectivity and business skills or seminars and intellectual property advice, etc. But in reality and in looking at what's been happening, the most important aspect of what Nanook is an actual place for this community. So you're finding that there wasn't an actual core central space at all in a country like Jamaica that's so known for art and music, etc. There was nowhere for the creators of these kinds of works to really get together as a community. And so you're seeing a lot of dialogue happening across creative sectors. So painters talking to musicians and interacting and collaborating with tech designers. And we're also now starting to invite in our corporate community, because we see that these worlds really need to be bridged. For the need to really tap into the spirit and potential, I think, of culture and creativity, you need to make it a community that your entire, a conversation rather, that your entire society is a part of.
A really interesting thought that you're raising there, because you're talking about a physical space which can enable certain conversations to happen. And Ken, you've created virtual spaces. Do you think that cultural change and the kind of conversations that lead to cultural change can happen as effectively in a virtual world?
I think I'm still fairly old-fashioned in the sense that I still believe in the power of convening. And if we look at a lot of what's happened recently, we look at the Arab Spring and we look at the various uprisings and larger movements, the ones that have been most effective haven't been the ones that have just collected several million likes or follows on a Twitter account. They're ones where people got boots on the ground. They actually did things. You know, Mubarak didn't leave the Egyptian presidency because 4 million people liked a page which said that they didn't like him. You know, he left because people got out on the street and demonstrated in person and made their feelings very, very much known. So I think the virtual side can certainly support the real side, the more sort of personal, in-person side. I don't think necessarily mutually exclusive, but of course what's great about virtual spaces is that you can connect with people across different countries and different cultures, rather than just the people who are in your sort of local geographical area. And I think that does help spread the word, it does help educate, it does help grow a wider movement around issues. And of course, you know, a lot of the issues people face, they're not unique in facing those issues. Climate change, environmental destruction, bad government, terrorism, all these things are not unique to any one country. I think there's probably no country in the world that doesn't suffer to some degree from some of these. So allowing people who are trying to solve those programs to connect virtually and then compare their experiences from different countries, from different cultural perspectives, can't be a bad thing, because if anything it gives us a chance to try and learn from each other in a way that we never previously could have done.
In a way, turning to you, Pamela, your work is sort of the very opposite of virtual. And I think I read a quote somewhere saying that you said, when you start to connect what you taste in your mouth to what you taste, feel and think, you start to put words to that taste and that feeling. And when you do that, it transforms the experience and you can become more aware. So the people that you work with, they are physically not only there, but they're experientially there by drinking the coffee, and the people who come and visit you. Do you think that that enhances the change that you're able to bring?
No, I mean, absolutely, because at the end of the day, social interactions, whether virtual or in person, they're about making people aware of themselves and of each other, right? Whatever the topic may be. By doing it over something so innocuous and so commonplace as a cup of coffee, there are great conversations that happen over, coffee, and it's a social lubricant, right? And I think putting it in that context, it makes talking about maybe more serious topics or more intense issues, maybe, a little bit more casual, and a little bit more, people become more open-minded about things. And I think with the whole idea of technology nowadays, you say something and at some point it goes out really, really quickly. It's about understanding that power and using it in whatever context that we are, whether it's physical or virtual.
And how do you really crystallize how you use culture in order to create social change, Pamela?
I think it's the whole idea of conscious consumption. For the work that we do, there is consumer consumption. And the whole idea is to get people to understand that they have the power to consume something so simple as a coffee or coffee class to create positive change. Right? It's a simple act. And that's all it takes. It is the simple daily act of everything that we do, whether it's going out to listen to a piece of music or to text an SMS to, an activist in Hong Kong or something like that. Everything that we do, it's all about that.
So that's interesting. It's the consciousness. That's why you talk about awareness a lot. That you think can really make the critical change.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that, Ken? You got a bit silent there, Ken. I don't know if the others can hear you, but I can't.
I'm here now. Sorry.
Oh, great. Sorry, I think you were muted there. Go on.
I was hiding. No, absolutely. I think one thing that technology hasn't yet given us is the ability to share coffee over a Google Hangout, and I think that's a real gap in the functionality set of a lot of these virtual networks. If we could sit and do this and share coffee, then we'd be in a much better place. But I like the statement. Coffee is a social lubricant. I think there is, as I said earlier, there's real power in personal convening and sitting down, and people actually in cafes and in sort of local environments, they speak to strangers over coffees in ways that they would never do just walking down in the street, and even in bars, in fact. Something very magical about coffee. I'm a big fan.
And more about the question of awareness I was interested in, because Pamela here is making a pitch for awareness and conscious consumption as being what for her is a kind of tipping point whereby culture can create changes and create community and create people to become empowered.
Yeah, I think that knowing that you're not the only one who's concerned about something is absolutely critical, because if you're going to have to put your head above the parapet and you're going to have to stand there and be shot if anything, if you raise objections to something you see which you don't like, knowing that there are other people around who feel the same way, knowing that there's empathy to your cause and your concerns, and that you're part of a wider movement, there's probably a far more people out there who share the same concerns and that don't yet know each other, and they're still waiting for that sort of technology connection across the internet and across geographies in order to find them. So, I think Chng.org and these online sites, which do a very good job of setting up and running really quite large petitions, are bringing people together who would never have previously got together. And having that shared sense of purpose is absolutely key. I would say, though, that awareness raising isn't necessarily everything. There has to be some action. I'm always slightly worried when I read about a lot of NGOs, I'm not saying this is the case for Better Barista at all, but a lot of NGOs who are tasked to raise awareness around things. People necessarily want to act. If they know that their mobile phone has a mineral in it which is fueling civil war in the Congo, they really probably want to know what they can do to stop that, rather than just knowing it. So I think awareness raising is important, and the internet and these social networks are brilliant at that, but there needs to be some action point somewhere in there to enable people to feel empowered and make people feel that they are actually contributing to a solution.
But in your work, Pamela, in your coffee salons and your coffee business, the individuals, the women who get these jobs as baristas and who you're training to be better baristas, their awareness is really changing their lives fundamentally. Isn't that true?
Yeah, and with what Ken said, with that awareness comes action. Can't take action without being aware. So with that action, then change happens, So I think it connects, definitely connects.
Yeah, and Joan, you were wanting to come in there. We're talking about a sort of very broad sense of culture. Do you first want to comment on that, and then I'm interested in diving in to talk about what the artistic culture and the transformational potential of that type of culture in changing people and making them more empowered as communities.
No, absolutely. I did want to come in because it was very, I think Pamela's spot on in that there is we're well aware of this sort of collective consciousness or pull towards things. And so it's been very interesting. It's been about 4 years that I've been developing the space of Nanook and the concept of Nanook before really launching it in Kingston. And what has been most amazing, I think, in the last few months, a lot of persons come to say, oh, it's interesting that it's great that this is happening in Nanook, and it's great that you're doing that now and you're doing that now, and I have to switch it and say, no, the brilliant thing is that we now have this space ready, and all of these different community groups are ready to use it. You know what I mean? Independently of us and what we were creating at Nanook. There was a musicians fraternity that was longing for a space to have live music jams. There was an artist community that was looking for walls that they could express themselves on and needed guidance with intellectual property issues. So all of these groups were independently trying to do more, and it's as if we've now given them a spot and said, listen, this is for you. And watching what they're using it for and how they're using it is one of the most exciting things at Nanook. And so it's just our role to kind of, we don't come up with the concepts of what happens. The creators already have that. We're just there helping to make it way more possible to achieve what they'd like to achieve. And then also, if we can, to protect them and show them how they can make some income for themselves and their family.
That's really interesting. And do you think that there's something in cultural creativity itself which empowers people to kind of connect with others in a way which is beyond the mind, beyond the intellect, but is about, you know, the heart, about feelings, about empathy that you were talking about earlier, Ken, which can be very, very powerful?
Is this for Ken or me?
For you, Joan.
Oh, sorry about that. Yes, I think that there's a lot of power in creativity and in culture. And the funny thing about culture and creative industries is that to be really good at it, I don't think that you can be focused on the money solely. I think that to really excel in a meaningful, sustainable, and long-term way in culture and creative industries, you do need to focus on the actual art and the importance of what it is that you're trying to create and why you're creating it. And that it's by focusing on doing that in the most effective way for your community and for yourselves that you're then able to make a profit, you know? I think the human connection and that aspect in culture and creativity, as Ken mentioned, and as, you know, Pamela's mentioned, you know, coffee is a great social lubricant, and these kinds of discussions that happen in the bar often is where I give a lot of legal advice over a drink or over a chat informally. These conversations and debates that happen when people speak about their careers, I think there's just so much learning that happens in these informal settings, and people call it networking and they call it whatever they like to, but I think what it really is communication and information exchange and skill building in the realest sense of the word.
We've been talking on very broad level with everybody, and we're all kind of talking, and it all sounds really marvelous, and everybody's having a kind of love-in, and culture's great, and we all talk to each other, and blooming marvelous. But if we're actually thinking about inspiring other people to do businesses like this, what are the real takeaways? How can we really help people engage and take culture in order to be able to go further with their ideas and genuinely change and empower communities? Any of you want to come in on here?
Go ahead, Ken.
No, go on, Joan. Ladies first. I don't want to be rude.
No, mine is very quick. I did just want to say to Emily and everyone watching and joining us that I don't want to give the impression that it's all happy families. The truth is that when you're fostering collaboration and trying to change the spirit of how a business is done, it requires a lot of conversations. My staff often say, oh, you're such a diplomat, because it requires meetings of minds and getting people to understand how they can make win-win solutions if we just dig a little deeper. So the conversations aren't always a loving, and it's not always a hugging. Sometimes it gets a little tense because people are passionate about art. It's just about making sure that people are committed to tackling the problem and not persons, you know?
That sounds a pretty wise advice. Ken, you wanted to speak here.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, there's, other than the obvious gender difference between myself and everyone else on the panel, which is, it was nice to see, obviously. What I also love, actually, about the work that Pamela and Joan are doing is that they are fixing problems local to them, which I'm not doing. You know, I took a very conscious decision a long time ago, mind you, to take more interest in things happening far away than in problems happening on my doorstep, in the youth of my country, my community, and so on. And of course, we have problems here as well. So I think one of the lessons I would always say to people who are looking to go out and build a social business and to try and put right many of the things that they see wrong is that let's not get hit up on the romantic, faraway, exotic problems. There's problems where everybody lives, and one of the things which we've been trying to do, and I think we're seeing increasing amounts of now in many African countries, is this new movement to try and encourage the birth of homegrown social innovation and social innovators who have that cultural understanding of the problem way more than I would ever have, despite my anthropology degree and all the other fancy things I might have after my name. And for me, that's the future of social change. It's not necessarily people like me jumping on planes and trying to help other people. It's finding ways of encouraging local networks to grow, local innovators to have the faith, the ability, the passion maybe, the confidence, and the tools. Tools are absolutely key, and that's where we can help. But to help them fix those problems, because I think the world would be a lot better place if we had a lot more Joans and Pamelas doing things out there where they live in their local environments, and having people like me perhaps where maybe my work previously followed the old model of looking to fix far away problems rather than focusing closer to home.
Interesting thought. Pamela, what are your thoughts here?
No, I completely agree with Ken. I mean, I think that's the beauty of the evolution of the social business, right? Maybe earlier in the history of things, you would have a catalyst like Ken go into an environment, right? And with his skills and knowledge, go in and give the local community these tools and new ways of thinking and doing things. But I think the change that we want to create on a local level, and this talks about culture, is understanding the culture of where we are and the culture of the problems that we're facing as a local people.
So go and talk specifically here, Pamela. When you look at what's going on in Singapore, a lot of people outside Singapore see Singapore as quite a wealthy community. You're an island nation. You know, I don't know. I've never been to Singapore, but it sounds people may have an idea that there isn't that much poverty in Singapore. Tell us about how you are engaging with the culture there in order to empower people.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to somebody in London, and they were like, "You have a social business in Singapore? Why do you need one? What problem are you solving?" Right? And I think people need to realize that in every society, in every culture, there are problems, right? And in a first world urban city like Singapore, we are facing first world urban issues like the widening income equality, and just they're really, really rich people here, but they're also increasingly people who are just at the margins. They don't necessarily have to be poor, not in the sense of the third world countries, but trying to just make a decent living for the family in an expensive city. That's a cultural and social issue, and we see more and more of that. And I think it goes all across many first world cities, in London as well. I'm sure that divide. So how do we address that issue, because it will keep getting bigger.
And where do you think are the most creative potential for people who are coming up, for social innovators who want to be generating business ideas which can have a big cultural impact?
I think every aspect of society and culture is open for us. It depends on the individual or the groups of individuals and what they understand and what they're I guess interested in. I mean, there are people who are interested in marine conservation, agricultural issues. It doesn't matter. I think the whole idea is to understand the issues and then to really dig deep and be honest about the kind of solutions that can possibly be generated, is to keep doing something, because we're not going to get it right the first time, right? And we're going to keep having to iterate the solutions as they present themselves.
And have you been thinking of what sort of other ideas? I mean, I don't know how Bettr Barista, whether you're going to be like Ken and become a serial entrepreneur. Have you got other ideas up your sleeve?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at outside of Singapore, because in the Asian region around us, there's a lot of poverty, a lot of women that need help. And I think, there are definitely opportunities for us. So that's what we're going to be looking at more closely next year.
Great. And what about you, Joan? Where do you think is the biggest creative potential for people wanting to set up social businesses with a big cultural strand?
There are so many areas of opportunity. I think, again, going back to my whole approach to generating business models and strategies, there are tons of problems in so-called third world countries. So that means that there are incredible opportunities to bring solutions. In terms of our culture and creative industries, our music industry, of course, is the one that's most well known and established. We have an emerging film sector. We have a recently signed co-production agreement with the UK that should facilitate some really interesting projects and collaborations. But I think that importantly, what we try to kind of embed or instill in any one of our members that comes through, regardless of what creative sector it is is a focus on intellectual property protection, yes, but also on IT, so in ITC, so in making sure that as much as possible they're developing technology-enabled or enhanced aspects of what they do. While I agreed with Ken totally that meeting in the real world, there's no real replacement for it, we are trying to make sure that we empower or encourage our communities to start enabling and utilizing technology more meaningfully, you know, to
Well,
reach
that's
markets.
fantastic. Fantastic you're saying that, Joan, because I actually wanted to turn now to look at culture in terms of technology.
We're in this together.
No, we're in this together. So when we think of the big changes, especially 5, even 10 years hence, let alone, you know, and of course now, you look at technology being the really big game changer in terms of providing and empowering people to do things that they just couldn't do before. And Ken, as somebody who has been at the cutting edge of being at the frontier, using technology, using SMSs, messages, texts, way before people had feature phones and smartphones in order to empower people. What do you feel is the most significant thing about technology which can empower people?
I would say for me, what it's done really is it's democratized social change. So if I think back now to the mid-90s when I was interested in development and interested in how I could turn my efforts to making the world a better place for people, you know, if you didn't build dams and if you couldn't teach and you weren't a doctor, there really wasn't a huge amount that you could do. The amazing thing we have today, thanks to the spread of the internet, thanks to the march of mobile phones and the growth of mobile phone ownership and mobile phone coverage around the world, anybody anywhere in their bedroom can build an app, put it online, and have a global audience immediately. Mm-hmm. So, you know, almost anybody anywhere now can actually build something which could solve problems for other people. And we never had that before. And that's the real power, I think. The real power is not necessarily in the fancy iPad-powered 4G high-tech solutions, which ironically most of the people that have the biggest problems can't use. It's simply that this technology has given everybody the chance to contribute. And they can choose to do that in whatever way they like. And that, for me, is the most exciting thing. And without any doubt, without mobile phones and the internet, I would probably now be training to be a doctor or to build dams, because I wouldn't have been able to do anything else.
And thank you for that thought about contribution, because in a couple of minutes we're going to be, wait a second, Joan, just to say in a couple of minutes we're going to be turning to hear some of your contributions on Twitter. So please do tweet us and take part in our conversation, and then we will be able to include you and bring your questions to the panel. But anyway, Joan, come on in there, and you started talking about technology.
Yeah, I actually wanted to link, I guess, what both Ken and Pamela had been saying, and ask Pamela if she's seen the same experience in Singapore. In that technology, while on one hand there is this growing community of young Jamaicans in particular that are designing amazing applications, we're seeing them being taken to Russia and all sorts of places, and our animation industry is booming, so the tech-heavy sectors are happening. But I think also in a very real way, there's a mass kind of section still of the population that isn't fully empowered to utilize or take advantage of the internet. And it's not necessarily that they're not connected, but I don't know if it's the lack of self-confidence, and so again, that's why I'm linking on to you, Pamela. It's as if these persons have been empowered, but they don't know it. I don't know if I'm explaining myself clearly. The internet is there and at their disposal, and there's the ability to connect and to reach all these markets, but without the sufficient confidence or direction or skill, these advantages still aren't being taken up in at the level that they could. You know what I mean? Again, I was just wondering if you had a similar feeling.
That's really interesting, and just want to repeat again the hashtag. That's Makers of More if you want to bring your questions to the conversation. But Pamela, please respond to the question that Joan asked.
Yeah, I mean, I think the young people have got all sorts of where technology is concerned, and it's actually maybe the older generation. You're right, there is access. You know, I think there's 99% broadband access in this country. But a lot of the older generation, through a combination of fear and not knowing, are not tapping into all of that progress that we've made. You know, and I think one of the things that we see happening is that there are more and more education opportunities to connect the young and the old. You know, where the young people through technology is able to teach the older generation something new, and in that exchange, I think empathy and understanding starts to get created. So yeah. So I think I see that more. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely echo that. Actually, I think one of the things that the social sector can actually do very, very well is that education component. We now have this incredible set of tools at our disposal, and some people are just very naturally good at picking them up and running with them and building very, very good things. Other people have less confidence. I think the general problem we have when we talk about culture is that we refer to it as a homogeneous blob where everybody is the same. We talk about, say, the Jamaican culture or African culture. There's lots of people that fall under those banners, and they're not all the same. Some people are naturally confident. Some people need more help than others. Some people work better individually. They're loners. They're perhaps introverts. But introverts have probably changed the world more than extroverts have if we look back over history. So I guess I would just throw in that it's our role, I think, to educate and to help people understand what this technology boom can mean to them in terms of social change. But at the same time, we have to appreciate that they're all going to be different, coming from different positions, different angles, and different strengths. And if we don't do that, then we're going to fail.
Yeah, there's no broad brush. You're right, Kim.
Okay, no, that sounds good. We have actually had one question to come in from some of our people who are watching this, Makers of More, and it was linked really to your point, Ken, about how awareness raising isn't enough. That if Twitter and Facebook are not enough to create social changes, what are the best technologies available today to really organize and establish relationships that can achieve more social impact? Do you want to answer that question first, Ken?
The best technology is probably the oldest technologies around. Passion, humility, empathy, your voice, not being afraid to stand up on a box and shout your beliefs, being a mobilizer. I think all those traditional sort of networking skills are still just as relevant today than they ever were. If we think about everything today as a Facebook or a Twitter revolution, we kind of think to ourselves, well, how on earth did the French Revolution take place? How on earth did they manage that without Twitter or Facebook?
Yeah, but I know that there's all this sort of broad talking, and it's empathy and humility and compassion and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, of course it is, but I think I just want to, on behalf of the person, actually address their point. I don't know if it was a man or a woman, actually. In fact, there's just one come through from Danny Mattiello saying, what's the next step in terms of using technology for social change? So, Ken, could you address technology itself?
Technology itself, well, for me, whenever I think about how technology can be applied to any of these problems, I put it right to the back of the queue. It doesn't come first at all, and that's the biggest thing I would say. Do you understand the problem? Do you understand the people who experience the problem? Is it a problem? Why are you fixing it? Can you work with other people to fix it? At the very end, you might think about what the technology solution might be, if any. As for whatever the next technology is, I actually really don't know. I think we're probably, if anything, becoming over-dependent on technology, and I would become increasingly fearful if the world ends up being driven by this thing, and then when we have a solar storm that takes out all the satellites, we just don't function. I mean, people now can barely function without their smartphones. If you put them offline for a day, they go crazy and they end up drinking huge amounts of Pamela's coffee. So, I think we need to be careful we don't create this massive dependency on it, even though it's very, very exciting. And I would say the one tip I would say is let's not get too het up by it. I would say, what are the next big social movements? What are the next big social problems that the planet's facing? How can we come together to tackle all the things that we're seeing around the world today? And then if technology is part of the solution, great. But if it's not, then also great.
Okay.
That might not be enough either, but I'm going to give it anyway.
Okay, no, good on you. And Pamela, what are your thoughts? Because you were hinting at technology and some the potential of technologies to connect people, young and old, and other people who are marginalised and excluded, and indeed people who are excluded by the digital divide itself.
Well, I think it goes back to the point that technology is a tool, and not every problem requires that tool as a solution. So it's coming back down to understanding what are you trying to change and to fix, and then using the right tool. And technology happens to be so well developed now and so powerful now that it inevitably shows up as part of the toolkit. I think the question is, what is that toolkit we're building? If we can get a toolkit that's robust, that has technological solutions to it, then that's I think a good use of what technology is, but not doing it for the sake of technology.
But we're also seeing a trend, aren't we? I'm not sure if you see it in your coffee shops, Pamela, but we're seeing a trend of people who are present but not present. They're sitting around tables, drinking coffee, and they're chatting to everybody who's not there.
Yeah, totally. I mean,
we don't want more of that. We don't want more of that. So,
Okay.
We're getting out of conversations in person.
I want to respond to some questions that we're getting in on Twitter about general questions. People are really interested in you guys and your change maker journeys. And when was it that you got that aha moment and you felt that you could go ahead and that your ideas were crystallizing around something that could work and make a genuine difference? Let's go with you first, Pamela.
Aha moments. I think there was just a little series of moments. There was no one big aha moment. It was just understanding firstly what drove me from a motivational perspective, and then going out there and looking at the things that were important, and saying, okay, so how do all these interests and passions converge, right? So it really was a convergence, I think, of different ideas and different ways of being. If it was a different time, I may not have chosen coffee, because I recognized the cultural trend that was starting at that point in time. But if it was something else, I could have chosen carpentry or some other industry that would have been able to give us a similar result. So I think it's just a series of being looking very consciously at what's happening and then connecting the dots in ways that that don't necessarily connect straight off.
But when we talk about self-empowerment and about the moment when you felt that it was going to be you who would take the lead in putting these things together, and rather than go and work for another company, you could make the difference yourself. You felt that sort of becoming a change maker as an individual. Just talk us through a little bit about that.
I think it was just a moment of insanity. Thinking that whatever you do in your life could have an impact or change somebody. I mean, to think that really does require a little bit audacious, I think. But it's true and it's possible, and thousands of people out there are doing that. So it was like, okay, maybe I could do it too, because I tried the corporate route. I did all those things, and it wasn't. It just just didn't seem that I was there yet. I wasn't on the right ship. So I was just going from ship to ship, looking for the right ship, and I think I'm on it right now.
And what about Joan? Does that echo for you?
Yeah. Funnily enough, I think I knew what I wanted to do for a lot longer than I felt the confidence and felt certain that, yes, I can actually do this. I think for a long time, I was trying to encourage other people to do this, and would go and speak at seminars and volunteer here and show support and advocacy there. And then I think it was while I was actually researching an honors paper, and I was going around to all the different creative industry agencies and stuff in Jamaica, and I thought, this is actually really difficult, and I've been studying this for a long time. I've been researching it. I have a car, and it's still quite a challenge for me. So I can imagine what a challenge it is for other persons. Emily, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Oh, my screen is frozen, so I wasn't certain. Right, so it was in going through that effort that I thought, what, this is really, really difficult. We have amazing talent. That's obvious. I've traveled around the world, and you've been in America, you've been in Australia, you've been in the UK, and Jamaican culture is there. And I'm like, we obviously have something that there's a market for. It must just be that it's too difficult, too confusing, too whatever else for us to get the business side of it right. And I started to think at that point and kind of pencil ideas in and go, maybe there needs to be a lounge, and maybe so there are all of these ideas, and Nanook is kind of what remains after we've tried and tested a few of these different approaches. So it's a mashup
So there wasn't really a kind of moment. You can't really visualize a moment when you felt empowered to act in that way. It was an ongoing kind of building up, a slow.
It was an ongoing thing, but I think, to be frank, one night recently when we had just members of the community together, and you had tons of fans, persons from the diaspora overseas, and you kind of looked around, and actually a friend was visiting from overseas, and he goes, you know, Joan, I remember being here 3 years ago, and you were talking about what's going to happen and what's going to be there, and he's like, and none of it was there, and to be honest, I couldn't see it. But I can, like, you can feel it happening now, and you can. So really, just about 3 weeks ago, there was one night in particular where there was an energy in the space, and you felt there's real potential here. There are some amazing, talented people, and more than that, there are people who are committed and conscious and wanting to do more and move forward. And I think that 2015, we're just very, very excited about the possibilities for all our members and for seeing our community grow and be better.
Great. And Ken, I know you've run such a lot of businesses. It's probably hard for you to look back in the 90s when you started your first business of this sort of first social business. Can you remember when you felt that you could take part, play a role as a change maker yourself?
You know, I always saw my role as a supporting role. I was a supporting actor for the people really doing the work. It was those people who were turning out on the streets to protest against bad government. It was people protesting about climate change or conservation, illegal logging, or health problems or lack of education. You know, I don't suffer from any of those things, so it felt very wrong for me to be personally getting too involved in those single issues. But what I felt I could do was in some way contribute and be a supporter and build tools to help the people that were having to go through those things and were having to demonstrate and were having to protest. And that's really how I found my role. You know, I never set out to solve a problem. I spent, from 93 to 2005, I spent those 12 years learning. And I just listened a lot and moved around a lot and spent a lot of time with people. And I think for me that learning has been huge, and I still carry it with me today. Just being able to understand what life is like for somebody earning $2 a day is absolutely crucial. You can read as much as you want, you can watch as much on TV as you like, but until you actually sit next to somebody and talk about that, or until you see communities struggling with really big problems, it's really, really very hard to get that empathy that you need. So, you know, with Frontline SMS, that was pure luck in a sense. It was, you know, early 2005, watching football on television, drinking beer, just suddenly coming up with this sort of light bulb moment of building a text messaging platform that would enable all of those local actors struggling with all those problems to start to use these growing numbers of mobile phones around them to make their work more efficient, to spread its worth, to enable them to bring in more people, increase their efficiency. And really, to this day, I still see myself as a supporter. I don't do any of the work myself. I haven't run a rural healthcare network. I haven't run an anti-government campaign. I haven't monitored an election. I've done none of that stuff, but I've been able to help the people that do. And I think that's absolutely key.
Okay. And go on, Joan.
You know, I just thought it interesting. In different aspects, I think each of us have really hit on the fact that recognizing a purpose is almost like the seed or the kernel towards figuring out the how and whatever else it requires to jump on board. I can definitely identify with what Ken's saying. Just having a moment and feeling like there is something that I can do to solve this solution. And yeah, it's a journey at times, I think, but I think having that confidence and sticking with it is key.
And how long have you run your Nanook enterprise at this stage, Joan?
Nanook's been, I founded it actually in 2008 when I first returned to Jamaica. So I'd been out of Jamaica forever, and I founded it in 2008.
And how have you seen, there's been a Twitter question that's come in to say, you know, what changes have you seen in your community since you started?
There are huge changes. Before there really wasn't, and it's amazing. People might think it's strange because Jamaica is so known for culture and artistic expression. And to be frank, yeah, it is still a place where in ordinary times you hear music playing in the streets and etc. But there really wasn't one space where these sorts of communities or creators could come together, where conversations were happening, where visitors even could meet with the persons who were creating the culture that they wanted to appreciate, and these creators could access markets. I think the biggest change that I've seen over that time is an increase in these kinds of spaces. So while Nanook is a bit unique in terms of, you know, it's this social offering, it's a lounge, but we're also kind of sneaking in the business services and the legal support.
And
So we're different.
So yeah, and Pamela, I'm just aware that we're going to close up soon, and I want to be able to just turn to each of you in a second. But before I do that, Pamela, I just want, you know, following on from the Twitter question, just to say, what are the changes you've noticed in your community when you're working with women and empowering them as better baristas? I can't hear you, Pamela. Are you muted there? No, you're gone mute. Yeah, go on.
Sorry. Okay. I think it's just a simple but very powerful idea that whatever change is created is from within, you know, and the work that we do helps the women that the women that we work with realize that it starts from within themselves, you know, and I think that's really the key thing, because it happens over and over and over again. Yeah.
And what does it mean for you, Pamela, to be a maker of more?
I think it's a real privilege. It's very humbling to think that the work that we do can help somebody. It's a very humbling idea, but I think we're excited about the years ahead. I think there's a lot more we can do, a lot more that change makers can do in general, because social problems are increasing, they are coming in your face. So we need to do something about it, whatever it may be.
Great. And the same question to you, Ken, as closing. To be a maker of more, what does it mean to you?
I would say I would like to think of myself as helping other people make more, and as me being the amplifier for their work. Because I've said I don't understand half the challenges they're trying to really solve, and if there's any way I can contribute to that, and if I can make them work better, help them learn about the new technologies that are available, build them tools, allow them to use that, then anything new, any more that's created as a result of my efforts is carried out through their work. And I'm almost the invisible one. I quite like being invisible in that sense.
Oh, I'm not quite sure that's true. I can see you very well over here. Let me turn to you, Joan. What about for you personally?
Yeah, I think that personally, it's my business, but it's very personal. I've had to grow a lot in order to try and bring about the change that I want to see in creative industries. I've learned that it's not so much about managing people for what Nanook's trying to do. It's more about getting in there with the creators and building this new reality, forging this new way forward. And so that's been the most rewarding part of being a maker of more, is getting to know my community. And to see the growth of individuals and projects. You know, I remember some people when they came in with an idea, and now I see them pitching to investors, and I just it's very, very rewarding to see that kind of thing happening, and to feel as if you somehow supported it or made that more possible. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so very, very much, Joan. Thank you all for joining us on this sort of open conversation on culture and technology. And the Ashoka and the Arthur Guinness Project, they're looking to support the other next best things in this area through the Makers of More, which is your idea, your community, your action. It's an online challenge, and they have a total of €30,000 in prizes to be awarded. And I should say that applications are going to be open until the 19th of December. And you can find out more at changemakers.com/makers of more. So thank you very much, Joan Webley, a cultural live wire in Jamaica. Pamela Chng, empowering individuals through your coffee, even though virtually we cannot drink it, in Singapore. And technological powerhouse and enabler, Ken Banks. And also thank you so much for joining us virtually, your tweets, your questions and your comments. We're very, very grateful. And I should say goodbye to everybody and the very best of luck for those of you who are going to take part. Bye. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.